are delighted to have Jack Alotto, a Fundraising Academy, back with us for day 2. So Jack, we've never really done this, but when I first started chatting with you about this concept, I was like, look, there's so much here. We need to really do 2 days. And you were very gracious and said, yes, I'll do this. And you said something yesterday, which I can't wait to get back into. You said, I've done all these epic fails and more.
And more, like 100 more.
I love it, Jack. I really do. Well, again, we're delighted to have you back with us. Again, if we haven't met, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. My trusted sidekick, Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd herself, is not with us today, but she'll be back with us tomorrow. We want to thank all of our presenting sponsors. Without them, we would not be here. The American Nonprofit Academy, Bloomerang, Fundraising Academy, who Jack represents, the Nonprofit Nerd, your part-time controller, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leaders, and the Nonprofit Atlas. So thank you to all of our sponsors who join with us. Okay, Jack Alotto, CFRE, back for day 2.
Day 2.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting for me. I love being on the Nonprofit Show. I love the work you guys do. It's really great and important. So that's good. And it's one of my favorite topics, epic fundraising fails. And just to repeat what you said earlier, I've made them all. I've made all the fails you could think of. So don't worry about failing. It's not about failing. It's about doing it right the next time. So,
and I'm going to witness, I really love that you said that, because when you said you've made these 10 plus hundreds more, I was just like, wow, it was awesome to have that lens. Because I think sometimes in fundraising, there's just so much fear, and then it's crippling. And so that really kind of like opened up my mind to hear what some of these things were. So we've gone through 1 through 5.
Right.
We're now on to 6. And I want to dive right into this, because you write failure to uncover donors' interests, values, and motives. Okay, right. That's huge. And how do you even uncover that?
So I think, the fail here is when we say, oh, they like our organization. We know enough about them. We never know enough about them. So one of the major things that we do in discovery is, as you said, let's find out what their interest is. What is their ability, their capacity to make a gift? How are they connected to our cause? All of these things are really important to find out before we even get to the ask. And the way we do it, as we said yesterday through this whole process, is we listen to them. We ask them open-ended questions, and we listen carefully to their responses. So how do we do this? What we need to do is we need to create a questioning strategy based on each prospective donor. And why I think we fail at this so many times is that we forget that we need to discover the donor's primary motivation. We need to discover their interest in our organization and why they consider it important. We need to build a rapport, and we need to foster trust. All of this is done during this discovery phase. I like to say it's the falling in love part with our donor or our prospect, finding out about them. We need to be sure that we are talking to the right person who has the authority to make the gift. And this is an epic fail. As I said yesterday, during each of these epic fails, there are these small failures. Have you ever gone and met with a donor and they say to you, Julia, I can't say yes to your request for a gift because I need to talk to my children or my wife or my husband or my parents. That means that they don't have the authority. So one way to avoid that fail, that fact that you're sitting with the donor and they don't have the authority is to find out as much as you can through a questioning strategy, whether they have the authority. Some things that I think are really important about this questioning strategy is you draft your questions before the meeting. I might say to you before the meeting about our women's health center or our hospital, I might say to you, Julia, what specifically around women's health is of interest to you? That kind of thing. And then we have to explain to them, and I think this is really important. This is the transparency part of need discovery. We have to explain to them what we hope to accomplish with this conversation. Okay. I'm going to say to Julia, I want to explore further why you are interested in our hospital's women's health center. What specifically interests you? And make it informational. We ask questions. The best questioning strategy are those that are clear and open-ended. Closed-ended questions do have a purpose, but if you really want to build a relationship and you really want to find out about Julia's interest in women's health, then ask her clear and open-ended questions.
Okay, so now I'm curious about this. I'm thinking of the cause selling cycle, and we're moving through that phase. And life happens, and life changes. We mature, our resources mature, and maybe our values don't change, but they might take a diversion. How do we keep this conversation going throughout our relationships with our donors? Or do you believe that this is really a one and done, that they don't morph?
No, it's never one and done. We have to, people are change all the time. Their interests change. You may be interested in women's health now, but then next week you may say, I'm really more interested in behavioral health. I have a nephew or a niece who is an adolescent and having issues. So I want to learn more about what your hospital is doing with teenagers around behavioral health or oncology or cardiology. As I get older, my interest in health is becoming more about cardiology and oncology and keeping exercising and growing old gracefully and all those things. So you have to constantly, with your donors, keep that conversation going and see how their thinking evolves and all of those things, the changes that come into their life. If they've had a death in their family, or they've lost a spouse, or they've had a new baby. So now they're interested in pediatrics and not so much in OBGYN kind of things. So you have to constantly adjust your conversation and your questioning so that you can uncover changes in their life. Remember, cause selling is a relationship building thing. We cannot build relationships with people we're not really interested in finding out about.
Right. I love that. And I think, Jack, that is an amazing frame of how we go about this. And the more I've worked with you and your team at Fundraising Academy, I realize that it does come back to that R word, relationship.
It's all about relationships.
Which is super cool, because I think that's the most genuine and sustainable path that we can take. Right. Another thing you talk about in the Epic Fundraising Fail is not rehearsing the presentation before meeting with the donor. And I'm really curious about this because a lot of times in the development world, we don't work in teams. And so what does this look like? And are you saying, like, stand in front of a mirror or try and sell somebody else? Like, what does this look like?
So the first fail is not knowing what your presentation style is or not having a presentation style. So we think at the Fundraising Academy that there are 3 types of presentation style. The first is, though, you have to understand what is your presentation style. Are you a person who wants to memorize your presentation? Yeah. I know you're interested in women's health. And I say, Julia, this is what we do at St. Elsewhere Hospital. Here's what here's what's happening. Here's what we do. That could sound very robotic, right? So we don't want to do that. But some people do have a memorized their presentation style. The other one, and the one that I really like, is the outline presentation. This is where before I meet with Julia and want to talk with her about women's health, I'm going to say, I want to hit these 7 points with her about women's health. And I don't have to have the outline in front of me, but I want to talk about, breast health. I want to talk about our birthing center. I want to talk about oncology as it relates to women, OBGYN, whatever it is. And I'm going to talk about the impact, what her gift will do for us. That's an outline. But here's something that happens to a lot of us. And maybe in your career, Julia, you've seen this. That's the impromptu presentation, where you're sitting somewhere and someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, Jack, don't you work at the homeless shelter down the street? Tell me, what are you guys doing?" So that could be where you have this impromptu meeting with somebody who is a prospect who you've never met, but they know who you are and they want to talk about what you're doing. So if this impromptu presentation, it follows the same things as the outline presentation or the memorized presentation. But the most important thing about an impromptu presentation is mastering the art of reading that prospect. What are they really interested in? Especially if you have no prior knowledge of them because they just came to you. What the impromptu presentation, the successful at this is, you have to understand people, you have to ask questions, you have to listen, and then you have to create this impromptu presentation based upon what you've heard. So if you say, "I'm kind of interested in women's health and I've never met you," and I'm saying, well, I would ask you, well, what specifically around women's health are you interested in? Why is this important to you? Why are you so interested in this? Whatever that is. So those 3 types of presentations you could develop and you could hone based on what you know about that prospect or donor before you even meet with them. And not preparing your presentation, that's a fail, guys.
Okay.
That's a fail.
It almost seems too like once you get in the habit of doing this and being more strategic and listening and responding, it probably becomes more natural. And I can see how it would really strengthen your opportunity to communicate what you need to in a short period of time.
Yeah. When I worked in healthcare, I am not a healthcare professional. I don't know anything. I think if I went into the operating room and saw blood, I'd probably pass out. But still, I had to have some general understanding. What happens in the ER, in the emergency room? What happens with a vulnerable baby? What's the neonatal intensive care unit all about? So, and if it's homelessness, we have to understand some key facts about homelessness or social services or poverty or hunger or whatever your issue is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We always need to be learning so that we can share that with our donors and our communities. I mean, undoubtedly. Now, this is a really interesting thing. And I was fascinated by this, Jack, not developing positive attitude towards donor objections. You seem to me to be a super positive person, very much like Jarrett and I, looking forward and being thoughtful, but really not being, trying not to be encumbered by objections that come
Right.
at us. So I'm like so excited to know what you see as like how we can do this.
If you could think back on some of the objections you received, and objections for most people are the most feared part of a presentation. After you've honed your presentation style, your skills, the most feared part for fundraisers are getting an objection. But here's what we say at the Fundraising Academy. If it weren't for objections, there would be no need for fundraisers, because people would just open their wallets and give money to every cause that came in contact with. If it was so obvious to a donor why they should give to your cause, and they do so freely and without hesitation, then literally there would be no need for us as fundraisers. We wouldn't be needed.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think the first thing we have to do about objections is redefine them as a positive occurrence.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that is
Tell me
really,
more.
okay. So most people think the word of, when they think of the word of objection, it brings to mind some sort of clash
Right.
between a fundraiser and a donor, in which case someone wins and someone loses.
Yeah.
The problem here is that people fail to understand that hearing the word no and hearing an objection is not the same thing. No means no. Handling an objection is just a sign of something that the donor or the prospects wants to resolve in their mind before they get to saying yes. Objections are vital to moving prospects closer and nearer to making a gift. What objections do, as we reframe what they are, they uncover the concerns of the donors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is so important. Objections reveal the key. This is such an important concept. Objections reveal the key to a successful ask. That's
Wow.
what they do. If we didn't get objections, I love objections for a couple of reasons. One, it tells me that that prospect and donor is still interested. If they weren't interested, they would just say, thanks, Jack, for the presentation. I'll get back to you, and they would leave. But if they ask objections or they tell us about their objections, they're telling me that they're still interested. And I think the fail here is not recognizing that objections are a normal and natural part of every conversation.
Mm-hmm.
In me talking to you about women's health, you might say, well, I'm objecting to the fact of something that you're doing around women's health. I think you should do more mammographies for poor women, or whatever it is. That's telling me that that's your interest. You're interested in caring about poor women who may not be able to afford mammography.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are important. And when we list one thing that we could definitely do before I meet with Julie about women's health, I might try to figure out anticipate what some of her objections may be.
Mm-hmm.
What might they be? And if we develop a list of these common objections that we see from other prospects around women's health, then we can create our responses and commit them to memory. So that if Julia asks those same objections or brings up those same objections, we will have responses to them.
Right. I almost feel like the word that I maybe just mentally supplant in my brain is I tried and put the word question instead of objection.
Love it.
Because I love what you said, and we just back up a little bit. You said, this is an indication that the donor is trying to discover you.
That's
The
right.
donor is trying to, a no is a no, and you walk out the door, and as the great Terry Axelrod has always said, bless and release. You move forward and you go to the next process, or donor prospect, I should say. But this is really, I love the concept of saying no. They're trying to determine what's going to be a good fit, and you're trying to provide an avenue that could be a good fit, because there are so many choices for most organizations. It's not just write a check and it's all going to go here. I mean, there are ways to support different things. Very interesting. It's very interesting. Before we move on to Epic Fundraising Fail number 9, I'm intrigued by I know you've worked in fundraising for the hospital sector. And wow, have you opened my eyes today about how many choices there are? And I'm wondering, I'm like a little curious about this. Do you think it's sometimes a better strategy to narrow things down? Or do you find that that's not a good way to go when you have so many choices?
I think that in my experience working in healthcare, typically people identify a global interest. Like they may say, I'm really interested in the emergency room,
Gotcha.
how quickly you respond. Then through those conversations, we will narrow it down. Are you capable of dealing with a massive heart attack?
Yeah.
Or what about a child who is hit by a car? What about gunshot wounds or other violent crimes that you experience? So then we start to narrow it down. The same thing if it's about women's health, we start to figure out what specifically. Women's health is a big area. Mental health is a big area. Oncology, there's all types of cancers, as you probably know.
Yeah.
So you have to, through conversations, building a relationship. The relationship model of fundraising is my mantra. I'm sorry, people, but I go back to, let's build a relationship with that person who just calls us up on the phone and says, I'm interested in women's health. And then meeting them, and then what they're really interested in is prenatal care. Then focusing our attention on that aspect of women's health, because they're going to have a baby.
Yeah.
And they want to know what kind of nutrition they should have, what should they be looking out for, all of those kinds of things.
It's so interesting. And again, it comes back to the relationship. Okay, now this is a really interesting thing. Number 9, and I really do want to spend some time on this. Not adopting a closing frame of mind and rejection. Right. Dealing with that. Talk to us about this, Jack.
So what we say at the Fundraising Academy is that most people think that the ask and, asking for a gift and getting a response is the close. We say that closing begins at the very first part of this fundraising cycle. It begins during prospecting. Okay. That's how it starts. It begins during that conversation. It's not an isolated segment of the fundraising process. Okay. In fact, asking is something that happens all along the fundraising process. Okay. Every single step of the way, we are asking for something. Maybe not for that $10,000 gift. So closing begins at the moment you speak the first words to the prospect and continues throughout the whole process until the gift has been received. You close on many points. I call Julia up and I say, she's a prospect, I've never met her, and I say, Julia, can we have coffee so I can tell you more about women's health? That's part of the closing process, okay? And then as I'm talking to her, I find out that she's really interested in, prenatal care. That's part of the closing process. Or that she has a need to support women who cannot afford mammographies, okay? That's her need, okay? And the acceptance and explanation of the organization's benefits. As successful fundraisers will tell you, begin the process of closing at the very beginning when the prospect agrees to meet with you. And then you get agreement on a variety of things all the way through. I may say to Julia, so it's really prenatal care that you really want to focus in on as it relates to women's health. That's really bringing it right down to what her specific interest and need is. Donor hesitation is natural throughout the process. We see that. Your efforts should be to understand how the donor feels when they hesitate during that closing process. I think the thing that is really important during this stage, having a closing frame of mind, as we like to say, is remember to be mindful that closing a gift begins at the start of the fundraising process and not at the end.
I'm fascinated that you teed it up this way, because that's not what I would normally think. I would normally think that it's the end piece, but I really, really like how you've helped guide us through this, because it makes it more natural. And I would almost say, I don't know if you think this is right, but almost more collaborative.
Yeah.
Which is kind
Oh,
of an odd way to look at it. But as we go to Epic Fundraising Fail number 10, this is interesting because this is like the future part, the
yeah.
role of stewardship in retention, loyalty, and attrition. So you're just saying, hey, you're not done once you get
Oh,
the
no.
AOK on the
Yeah.
gift. You
Yeah.
got to look at this.
So I like to say this, we say this at the Fundraising Academy, the best way to increase your value as a fundraiser to your organization is to build a loyal donor base.
Mhm.
And how do you do that? I'm going to give you some really easy things that you don't have to necessarily fail at. The first is to give first-rate service and consistent follow-up. I've talked in other classes and webinars that I've been on. When I make a gift, I don't want some online service to give me a receipt. I want the organization to reach out to me and thank me personally, not Salesforce or Donor Perfect or PayPal or any of those various services we think I didn't make a gift to them. I made a gift to the organization. So remember to give first-rate service and consistent follow-up. Here's the first thing I like to say. First, think like a donor. If you want to strengthen your stewardship activities and increase donor retention, which by the way is abysmal, 46% or whatever AFP says it is, it's an abysmal donor retention rate. That's horrendous. If you were working in a retail store and your store sales you only had repeat customers of 46%, they probably fire you. If you were Bloomingdale's or Nordstrom or whatever the retail place was. So if you want to increase your donor retention and build loyalty, the first thing is to think like a donor. Get in their head. How do you think like a donor? Be a donor. You want to know what a donor thinks? Go out and make a gift. It's such an essential step to learning how to think like a donor. Get to know them. Haven't we been saying this over these last 2 days? Get to know your donors. The best way to get to know your donors is to offer them the opportunity to become more involved in meaningful ways that go beyond writing a check.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is so important. Go the extra mile. I love this. Be willing to give your donors more than they demand and far more than they expect. That's how you keep donors. That's how great retail outlets keep their customers coming back, by great donor service.
Right.
Say thank you like you mean it. Don't make it some form letter that you send out. Remember, only 1 in 4 donors receive a thank you letter. That's terrible. 45% of donors, this is a national statistic from Penelope Burke, the great guru of fundraising. She says in her book, Donor-Centered Fundraising, that 45% of donors said it was an outstanding thank you letter that inspired them to give again.
I love it.
I mean,
I love it.
That's a no-brainer, guys. Your donors are not expecting to see their names in lights. They just want a warm, personalized letter, a call, whatever it is, saying thank you.
Thank you.
Create personalized messages. The 4 P's of thank you letters? Be prompt, be personal. Don't send me a dear friend letter to thank me for my $25 gift. Okay? Be passionate about your cause and their involvement, and be grateful to them about that passion that you bring. Be positive. Here's the thing, the final point that I will end with. Think like a major donor.
Love it.
Treat every single donor like they are a major donor. You know why you should treat them like they're a major donor? Because they think they're a major donor. If $50 is the best and largest gift they can give you, that in their mind, they're a major donor. So treat them like a major donor. Those are simple things that do not cost any money to do.
I love it, Jack. We made this offer yesterday. If you have been with us and you want to get this all on one page, these 10 epic fundraising fails, email me. I can't tell you the number of people who had done that. I left my studio, went to my office, and there were a whole bunch of folks that had already emailed me, which was super cool. I gave out my personal email address, jcp@americannonprofitacademy.com, and we will get this PDF to you. It would be fabulous to take to your team, to do an exercise, to talk about, to tape up in your office so that you know kind of where you should be thinking. I love it. And Jack, as always, you have been just a delight and such an amazing voice of leadership and thought in our fundraising, in the nonprofit sector when it comes to fundraising. So we want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, again, I'm Julia Patrick. Jarrett Ransom will be back with us tomorrow. Check out back episodes. And if you want to refer to part 1, you can do that on some of our streaming platforms. We also have a new podcast that's going where we're taking all of these episodes and putting them into that format. So if you like to consume your information that way, you can find us on the most popular streaming services out there. Again, thank you to all of our presenting sponsors, from Bloomerang to Your Part-Time Controller, American Nonprofit Academy, the Nonprofit Nerd Fundraising Academy, Nonprofit Thought Leadership, the Nonprofit Atlas, and Staffing Boutique. Again, they help partner with us every day so that we can share this amazing knowledge. Jack, you are a treasure, my friend.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. So much information. Jack's going to actually be in the hot seat with me next Friday on Ask and Answered. And so you'll get to see some more. Yeah, you'll get to see more of him. Again, as we like to end every episode, we want to remind all of you, and I think ourselves, stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here tomorrow.